shortly, anyway. Yeah? Okay. Okay, hello everybody. I've noticed in the program that I'm referred to as a TV futurist, which makes me sound way cooler than I actually am. I'm actually a lecturer here at the University of Nottingham, and most of my work has tended to be around how people like you watch television. So what is it that makes us want to watch television stories? What makes us not want to watch television stories? And in particular, how technology is changing that. Why are we suddenly turning to iPads and laptops and watching television in potentially new and exciting ways? But what I'm going to do today is actually think about very old forms of television and actually think about broadcasting and the way that broadcasting might actually still have a place in this magical, wonderful, multi-screened world that we currently live in. So you're probably very familiar with debates going on around how television is changing, that there's a revolution going on in the way that we watch television content, that services like Netflix are going to make the way that we engage with TV content completely different to the way that we did maybe even 5 years ago. Most recently, perhaps the biggest sort of example of this was the BBC announcing that BBC Three is now only going to exist online, that it isn't going to exist as a broadcast channel anymore. And that's quite a big change. Everybody seems to be assuming that, yes, television is completely different. Broadcasting, in a sense, is dead, that television broadcasting doesn't matter anymore. And I kind of want to rethink that a little bit. I want to rethink what broadcasting actually means, but also what its place might be and what it might offer us as to why I don't actually think broadcasting is quite as dead as people seem to think it is. But we'll start at the beginning. Does anybody actually know where the term broadcasting comes from? Why we use this term broadcasting to describe a particular type of viewing TV?
It's something to do with farm.
It is, yes. Well done, points to you. It's a farming term. So it effectively means standing in a field and sowing seeds broadly. That's what the term means. And that's why we use it to describe television broadcasting. It's a message, a story, coming from one central point out to millions of people all at the same time. So the fact that it's live becomes incredibly important to the fact that it's broadcasting. That's a kind of defining characteristic of what makes broadcast TV different from Netflix or iPlayer or even watching a DVD off your shelf. So we can take something like the Olympics, probably the biggest broadcast moment in recent years, the London 2012 Olympics, at least the BBC certainly wanted you to think it was. Dozens of events all on simultaneously on broadcast television. Ratings estimate that that 90% of the UK population watched television broadcasting, watched the Olympics at some point during that 2-week period. And that includes children who probably were off doing something else and not really caring about who won gold. But you may come back to me and say, well, how do we know that they were actually watching television or watching television broadcasting? Maybe they were watching on a laptop. Maybe they were watching via iPlayer. And to a certain extent, you'd probably be right to raise that challenge. One of the big things about the coverage of London 2012 was that it was everywhere and it could be wherever you wanted it to be and you could watch it whenever you wanted it to be. But if you start thinking about it, that doesn't mean that even if you weren't watching it on your television set, that doesn't mean that A, you weren't watching television, you were, or even that you weren't watching broadcasting. And I want to sort of illuminate this through a sort of more personal anecdote in that I was at a beach volleyball game on the evening that is now referred to as Super Saturday, when Team GB won 3 athletic golds within 45 minutes. And it was a great night. There was beer, there was a conga line, there were American fans dressed up in the most amazing star-spangled Stars and Stripes costumes. There was someone dressed up as a gingerbread man for reasons that escaped me. It was a brilliant evening. And we were watching live sport, we were at an event. But what slowly started emerging while we were there was that we were somehow missing something. There was something lacking in our experience. And that started happening when the announcer came on the PA system and to great applause and cheers announced that Jessica Ennis had just won her heptathlon gold. Everybody was excited, everybody cheered, it was great, lovely, Brilliant. Went back to watching the beach volleyball. A few minutes later, another announcement came on that Greg Rutherford had won his in the long jump. Again, more cheers, woohoo, go Team GB kind of thing. But then something weird happened, and the guy in front of me, who I didn't know, complete stranger, turned on his smartphone, and he pulled up the BBC's live feed of the Mo Farah's 10,000 metre race. And we sat on a smartphone, surrounded by strangers, watching live broadcast TV. We weren't watching television. We were watching it through one of these devices that are apparently going to destroy television. We weren't at home in the space that's normally associated with TV broadcasting. We were in public, we were at a sporting event, and we were still watching broadcast TV because that gave us something. It gave us something different. I'd been following the text updates on the BBC website, so I knew that Jessica Ennisford had won before the announcer told us. So I knew what was happening, but I was still somehow missing something until that smartphone came out, and suddenly we were able to watch broadcast TV, and we were therefore a part of that moment in a way that we weren't beforehand. And that's the kind of thing that starts pointing towards the continuing importance of TV broadcasting, that moment, that sense of liveness and of eventness gives us something, and is something special and is something different. We can jump a little bit forward. Anybody, I don't know that any of my students are actually here, but if you did, you won't be surprised that I'm bringing in Doctor Who, because I always do. Doctor Who is a more recent example of exactly the same kind of event. So it had its 50th anniversary back in November, and it was a massive broadcast event. Everything was about that moment on the evening of Saturday, the 23rd of November. It was on television, it was in cinemas live, it was on social media. Google did a Google Doodle where you could get a little game as the Doctor. You could tweet, you could watch prequels. It was this massive broadcast event. It was all about that one moment when the Doctor finally met up with his 10th incarnation and his John Hurt incarnation. That was a moment. Yes, you can still go and watch that episode. Of course you can. You can go and watch it on Blu-ray. You can go and watch it probably on Netflix. You can watch it illegally if you want to. You can watch it on your laptop. You can watch it on your tablet. But that's not quite the same thing. It's not quite the same as watching it at that moment on November the 23rd, when you're sitting down knowing that millions of other people are watching it at exactly the same moment as you. And there's a kind of an interesting little piece of data that emerged out of this, out of the Doctor Who anniversary special, if I can get the blipper to work. There we go. It became one of the most tweeted episodes on television. It became the most tweeted drama episode ever. But what is particularly interesting is that there's this big gap in the middle. There's lots of tweets before 7:45, and there's lots of tweets after 9 o'clock. There aren't many tweets, or aren't half as many tweets, while the episode's actually on, because broadcast TV took precedence, that people were watching it, and that therefore gave them something. There must have been a reason why their attention shifted to television and to broadcast television in that particular moment. And there are various reasons why I think that is the case, and why I think that there still is a place for television broadcasting, and what that certain special magic something is that gives television broadcasting something that can compete with Netflix and with catch-up services and with DVDs and all the new ways that we can watch TV. The first is that making a choice out of the seemingly unlimited array of content is really, really hard. It's hard work. If you imagine walking into a library where every single book ever written sits there, you can do it. You can go to the British Library and pretty much do that. If you could walk into a room full of every single television episode ever broadcast and every single film ever made, how would you choose? How would you start to make a decision? It's why Netflix plows so much money into making a good recommendation system, because making a decision is hard work. Making a choice is hard work. And entertainment television is kind of supposed to be fun. It doesn't have to be. It can be very hard-hitting. But it shouldn't necessarily have to be work to get to television. And that's why there's still a place for having someone like the BBC or Channel 4 or Sky telling you this is what you want to watch at this point in time, because we think this is good and we think you'll like it. It's easy. And you might say that just suggests that we're all lazy, and that I'm lazy. But there's also something pleasurable in that. There's something good and useful and special about just being able to go and watch something, not having to trawl through lists of different genres or different titles to try and figure out what you want to watch. So this idea that making a choice is hard work and it's tiring and you don't always want to do it means that broadcasting always can give you something that can counter that. And this comes to the second reason why I think television broadcasting is still important and still matters. And that's that there's something very comforting about television broadcasting, that it's always there. There's a sort of apocryphal almost phrase that in relation to radio broadcasting, that you know that the end of the world has come if the Today programme isn't on Radio 4. That there's something reassuring about turning on a television and knowing that the world exists because BBC One's still on. There's something comforting about that. There's also something comforting about knowing that when you get home from work or from lectures at 5:15, Alexander Armstrong and Richard Osman are there waiting for you. That Pointless will slide you nicely into dinner time, and that there you can then follow Holby City and the news through the evening to bedtime. There's something comforting about that. It's reassuring that Wimbledon adverts come in probably in about a month or so to remind you that, hey, it's summer. Summer's coming. That even if the weather might not agree with us, that Wimbledon points us and reassures us that it's summer again. Christmas is always heralded by lots of things, but including those little idents, which are those little snippets of footage that you get between programmes that remind you that Christmas is coming. All of that's very reassuring. It reminds us that it's sort of comforting that it's always there, that it's always kind of guiding us through potentially our evening's entertainment, but also just pointing out, hey, Christmas is coming up and maybe you should go and buy your mum a present. And then this then leads me to my final sort of reason why I think broadcasting is important. And that's because people love it. People love stories. We've already seen examples of how important stories are and how stories can create a very passionate emotional response to them. And television stories are no different. Film is no different. We really do love stories, and television is part of that. When you love a story, you want it as soon as you can get it. There's a reason why tomorrow morning at 2 a.m, Sky Atlantic is showing the first episode of Season 4 of Game of Thrones. They're showing it because people will go without sleep in order to watch it at exactly the same moment that people on the East Coast of America are watching it, because it matters that much to them. It's that important. And that's when broadcasting, and even if we're talking about other forms of watching TV, other ways of watching TV, the logic of broadcasting, the logic of liveness still becomes important, because we want it now. If we love something, we want it as soon as we can get it, and the soonest way we can get it is that moment when it's released, and that's what ties into the broadcast moment and into broadcast TV. So even things like Netflix that are offering very different ways of watching TV kind of still subscribe to broadcasting. All of House of Cards comes out on the same day because people want to watch it now. They want to get it in the moment. They want the live day. They want to be amongst the first people to watch it and know that they're watching it with a load of other House of Cards fans all at the same time. That sense of eventness and liveness means that broadcasting is always probably going to be there. I'm going to state my claim that broadcasting is always going to be there. That there's always something about broadcasting that makes it special, that makes it important and makes it exciting, and makes us want to go and watch it. So all of these things, the fact that it's reassuring that it can always be there, it can kind of remind us, hey, it's bedtime now, because you've gone onto the signing zone, so you should probably go to sleep. Hey, it's Christmas, because we're getting the John Lewis advert and Christmas idents on the BBC. All of that's comforting. It's easy, and that's not a bad thing. That's okay that it's easy. Television and entertainment shouldn't be hard. So helping us through that massive information and massive choice is a good thing and is an okay thing. And finally, because we love it, because we really passionately want to get our content as soon as we possibly can, that's why, even though broadcasting isn't the only way we watch TV anymore, that's why I think it still matters and why we're probably still going to be watching television content for quite a long time to come, television broadcast content for quite a long time to come. Thank you.